Of Real Talk. I am your host, Officer Antoine Thomas, and I always like to say, "Yep, that's me." Almost forgot that. We do want to do that here on Real Talk because you are listening to Real Talk. Now, if you hadn't had the opportunity, last episode entitled, "Okay, Women Who Support Law Enforcement," please do. Had two great friends, Lindsay Lacassi, and then we brought Alexandria Levine on, and we talked about all things blue, all things how they support law enforcement. And one thing that Back to Blue NC is doing on Lindsay's turf is that they are paying a lot of respect, a lot of support to our fallen. Of course, in North Carolina, we experienced two fallen off last past year. Okay, well, we had one happened this year. Unfortunately, we had a mass shoot to a community and people. And one of the people that he happened to shoot was Officer Gabriel Torres from the City of Raleigh Police Department, who was on his way to work. Innocent guy. He didn't make it to work. He was brutally murdered. But we also had a good brother of mine from the Wake County Sheriff's Office, Ned Bird. He was ambushed by an illegal immigrant who he had thought he was to help. Thought a vehicle was, as we motorists, and it turned out they were there doing some illegal activity, from what we understand, possibly picking up a shipment from the cartels. Which, come to find out, Ned Bird interrupted that little brief moment. And what they decided was, I'm illegal anyways. They don't know who I am. They killed him in an ambush style. And I'm still, at times, when I think about it, just makes me not only upset, but it makes me want to, as we say, get revenge. But we know the justice system will hopefully prevail. But this gentleman did actually break out of prison somehow. Well, I know how it happened. He had help inside and out. And I hope that when it's said and done, they're going to get down to the bottom of how he was or how he escaped. Okay. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. As you can see, I have a little bit of the 45 flag. Of course, you always know that we have the time flag here as our background, but I'm here to talk about those things. Neither I'm here to talk about Trump. I am here to first say thank you to our men and women who has served in the United States Armed Forces as we get ready to come up on Memorial Day. I want to say thank you for your tireless service. And I also want to add to that our men and women serving in blue, law enforcement, who has given their lives, okay? That show that I did the other day was centered around the National Police Week, which is where everybody goes to D.C. and they pay homage to those who have lost their lives in the line of duty. There's some memorial things going on. There's some excitement going on as well at National Police Week, which is held every year in Washington, D.C. Now, as you can see, you have a gentleman in a cowboy hat. Some of you may be saying, is he a professional bull rider? PBR. No, maybe he does that in his spare time, but if you look very closely, you'll see a star, 5 point there. So that kind of gives you a hint. No, we're not making another movie of the Wild Wild West. This is the real talk. I have an awesome gentleman who I look forward to bringing on in a moment. I'm going to build him up real quick, okay? He is, and this is perfect for Memorial Day weekend, he is a United States Air Force veteran of the United States Air Force, and we thank him for his service. He also spent 26 years in the United States Border Patrol as an agent. 11 of those spent as the special agent in charge of Sanderson Station, located in Texas. Okay, he was appointed as the sheriff, and I would imagine that the governor appointed him, but he's going to tell us if I'm right or wrong. I know in North Carolina you can be appointed by the governor, but if it wasn't Governor Abbott that appointed him, somebody appointed him. But then he took it upon himself with a great paying group and staff to run his own election, which he won, back on May 22, and he has served 1 full year as the sheriff of Terrell County, Texas. If you would, real talk, do as we always like to do, give it up to our special guest, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland of what? Terrell County, Texas. Sheriff, how are you doing today?
Howdy, Antoine, and thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it, and thank you for what you do and for the communities you serve, and for getting the word out, good or bad. For getting people on here to talk about law enforcement and taking care of our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. And you hit it on the nail. Here on Real Talk, I always say when I designed this show, when it was, as I like to say, in the first of conception of the show, I always said this: we will never defend the police. We'll always, we'll never defund the police. We do want to defend them. So I got it backward. We'll always defend the police. We're going to talk about the good and we're going to talk about the bad of policing. So we're going to praise what's right. We're going to praise what's wrong. Why? Because we don't want to be hypocrite. This show is an occasional piece, Sheriff. I like to educate people. I've done shows all the way from what is a grand jury. That show wasn't centered around President Trump, but it was sort of given the idea as he went through the grand jury. We found out that he was indicted. And they found him, of course, guilty on those charges. Don't know where they're going with this yet. But I decided to host a show, again, to educate people on what a grand jury is. What does a grand jury do? I've held shows as far as from, I forget the officer's name now, but it'll come to me in a moment. And I understand been let free from jail now or prison. I think she spent years there. But when the officer mistakenly thought that she was picking up her taser and she grabbed a gun and shot of course, they said unarmed. And yes, he was unarmed. However, he was a fugitive of justice. He had arrest warrants. And unfortunately, she paid the ultimate price for that. One lost their life. And of course, she went to prison for a few years. And I'm sure she has to register now as a felon. But here goes the deal. We talk about the good and bad. I talked about some of the errors where she made. That could be obviously human error. And I also praised some of the things that she did. And one of the biggest things I thought she did was to have that inclination not to retreat, but to say, hey, I'm going to help. She got into the fight. And unfortunately, getting into the fight during the act caused her to make a fatal mistake, right? But those are some of the shows I talk about. But today's show, Sheriff, this is another informational show. I want to discuss all things that are going on in Texas. And as you've been a former Border Patrol agent and a special agent in charge, who better than to have on the show and hear from you? Now you're serving in the capacity as the sheriff, so you hit it from two prongs. But Sheriff, I don't want to steal all. I want to go ahead and allow you to have that thrill to tell the listeners is who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. And then what we'll do, we'll segue to this thing because a lot of the listeners right now are saying, well, what are they going to be talking about? Well, they're going to hear it from us today. Stay tuned. Sheriff Thaddeus, again, thank you for coming on the show today. I almost said thank you for having me, but I'm glad to have you on the show. It's your floor.
All righty, Antoine. Again, thank you for having me today. And tell you what, I'm glad to be here and tell you what goes on along our border. I can tell you, having served in 26 years, United States Border Patrol, I've seen just about it all. As we've developed this friendship and this relationship, the past few days, what's going on along our border, what you hear from the United States government and what you see on the news, complete opposites. The government saying that the border's under control, but I tell you, it's not. It's the worst shape it's ever been in. Definitely my 26 years of Border Patrol or serving in the Border Patrol. But before we get a little bit more into that, you did mention about being Memorial Day weekend. So definitely want to thank all of those and remember all those who paid, the ultimate sacrifice. I myself, as you mentioned, a veteran. I had two grandfathers that served. Both were career Air Force. I wanted to be a Marine, but thank God they talked some sense into me. I also married to a woman in the Air Force. I met her while I was in the Air Force, and I've got a son serving in the Air Force as well. But also today is a very special day because today is the 99th birthday of the United States Border Patrol. We were first enacted back in 1924, May 28, 1924. Next year will be our 100th year anniversary. So, very special day to those of us who have served or currently serving the United States Border Patrol. With that said, lastly, you mentioned, Police Week. the observation of National Police Week. And Border Patrol, we've lost more than any other United States federal service. We've lost about 153 Border Patrol agents in that 99 years. I actually lost a very good friend of mine in Nogales, Arizona, where I started my Border Patrol career back in 1997. His name was Alexander Kirpnik. He was an immigrant from the Ukraine. I spoke many different languages, came in just a few months after I did. We began our career. We cut our teeth there in Nogales. And about a year after us being in, he jumped a dope load in Potrero Canyon. And he had everybody on the ground. As he was getting things situated, he had a partner with him, but one guy had a weapon, turned around, shot, and it hit Alexander in the head and killed him. So, thinking about Police Week, and I think about him often, but that time. So, you talked a little bit about myself and where I'm a sheriff at. So I'm actually a sheriff in my hometown, my home county. This is where I grew up, where I graduated high school, where I joined the Air Force from. It's the 10th largest county in the state of Texas. We have 54 miles of border with Mexico. We have I think I mentioned 2,400 square miles. We have 2 deputies, a sheriff and deputy, a sheriff and a chief deputy. My partner, Diego Gonzalez, he is also a Border Patrol agent for a career. We have 3 dispatchers / jailers, and I'll tell you what, the work that those dispatcher jailers do is a lot more than what I do, and I do a lot. Diego and I both do a lot. It's they're the lifeline to not only to Border Patrol agents at the time, to us in the sheriff's office, but to our Texas Department of Public Safety personnel we have working here in the county, our Texas Parks and Wildlife game wardens, EMS services. They dispatch for all of them. So I just want to make sure I give them a shout out and just brag on the good work that they do. But when I described what Terrell County is in the border with Mexico, but to put it more in perspective, and I like to say we measure in hours rather than miles out here. So when you go and you purchase a new cell phone and you walk into that AT&T store or Sprint, T-Mobile, whatever it is, and you see that map of America on the wall, and it's completely all red because we have coverage in the entire United States of America, except there's one little dot, and that's down by the Mexican border, and that's Terrell County. We have very little infrastructure out here, whether it's along the border. It's a very desolate place, but best place to raise a family, and that's why I came home to lead the men and women of the United States Border Patrol, to be able to protect the community I grew up in and serve that community, and have had the opportunity not only as a Border Patrol agent, the patrol agent in charge of the station, but also now as the sheriff. So growing up here, I was raised by my grandmother, and there were so many families that really blessed me, that raised me as if I was one of their own. Again, a grandmother that was strong in faith. She instilled her faith into me, my values. But so many families that treated me as if I was one of their own. And I like to often say that I was better off than most kids with 2 parents. But, again, growing up here, graduating high school, I moved off to college, to a community about an hour away in Alpine, Texas. And I went to college there for a semester. My major, my courses were all law enforcement. I've known from a very young age, actually back to first grade, that I would be in law enforcement. I either know I'd be a Texas Department of Public Safety highway patrolman or a United States Border Patrolman. And I just happened to test for the United States Border Patrol before I tested for highway patrol, and the rest is history. But yes, I served 3 years in the United States Air Force. I had signed up for 4. Again, one of God's blessings. I had tested for the United States Border Patrol while still on active duty in the United States Air Force. I passed the test. My career field happened to be overmanned. So, I went to my leaders, to my commander, Colonel Ross, and explained to him that Border Patrol is what I wanted to do for a career. And he let me out of my obligation a year early. And I started with the United States Border Patrol back in February of 1996. I actually went out to the Border Patrol Academy in Glencoe, Georgia. And it was about 6 months long. And then I was shipped out to Nogales, Arizona. And at that time, Nogales was ground zero for border security. Did you have any specific questions yet? Because I can keep going. And you may have to interrupt me. You won't hurt my feelings, Antoine, because man, I'll just talk and talk and talk.
Well, we got a lot of great things to discuss, and we have so many great things to talk about, and the truth will definitely come out. So some folks are wondering as you speak, they're saying, what is the show all about? And so today we want to tell you that we're going to be talking all things southern border, but we want you to hear the real truth. See, the media and of course the Biden administration feeding us a bunch of lies. And for the most part, if you're smart enough to figure out that that's not exactly true, what he's saying is very obvious, because guess what? The vice president never went down to the border. She said, why did she need to go? She said it's the same thing as if she went over to, I think she said France. I think she used that analogy. Okay, AOC went to the border, wore a white pantsuit, I think, and had, they call it crocodile tears. Apparently, it was just a photo op. Why would you even wear white to a desert place? That's number one mistake. And so why did I bring that up? Because they're feeding us a bunch of lies. And what better way and why did I fitting to bring a gentleman who spent 26 years protecting our border, okay, and now the sheriff who is still protecting our border with limited manpower. Why not have him on the show? But today's show is at our southern border. Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland is going to tell us all things there. But I want to share something with you. A couple weeks ago, I put out a post on the Party of Trump's Facebook page. I happen to be a moderator in there, so I have a chance to get in there and post whatever I want. Of course, I don't get crazy, but I said something. And it was right when Title 42 was getting ready to expire. I had an epiphany laying in bed, and I had to write it down. Went to Facebook with it. I said this, Sheriff Thaddeus, and it wasn't profound, wasn't something that was amazing, but after about 500 views and likes on it with likes on it, I guess it was profound. That's not what I was trying to accomplish, but this is what I said. I said, would it be, and I said, of course, I have an epiphany. I started that, Sheriff. But I said, would it be that Biden, of course, we know he has some cognitive issues, but would it just be that he has decided to dismantle Title 42, open up our borders so that people like the other sheriffs and border patrols will have a heck of a time trying to catch up, and God forbid the dangers that come along with it. You talked about a good friend of yours who was killed at the hands of a illegal immigrant with a firearm that probably wasn't even legal. But would it be, Sheriff, and you tell me if I'm wrong and tell me if I'm just crazy, would it be that Biden's opening up this border to everybody? Of course, everybody always assumed, because I used to think this too, that only the Mexicans was coming through the southern border, but we forgot about our El Salvadorians, our Venezuelans, and all these other folks that you're going to talk about, Guatemalans, who come through the Mexican border as a entry point. Well, why won't they go to the Canadian border? Because nowhere near the Canadian border, right? As much, and you'll be able to talk about it too, maybe. I'm sure it's much stronger to get through that Canadian. I don't know, never been. But would it just be because Biden knows and his administration knows that he's not going to be the commander-in-chief in 24? So he is saying, why don't I create just a huge disaster for the man himself? And of course, I'm going for 45 Donald Trump or whoever the next president may be. It won't be Biden, though, right? I believe that even the Democrats are going to surprise us because they're not going to vote that man back in. But would it just be, and I'm going to shut up, that he knows he won't be the president any longer, so why not create a huge mess for somebody else coming in? After all, President Carter is no longer considered the worst president in American history. Biden has taken that trophy. So would it be just that he is saying, you know what, since I already have this black mark on me, I'm just going to get all up. I'm going to mess it all up, leave it in the hands of the next who will have a hard time securing that border than they ever had, because I'm opening the wide body. This is what I said on Facebook, Sheriff, and I believe it to be true. Why would any other person who considers themselves, he's supposed to be an American, obviously, he was born there, but the president, why would he not want to protect them? Why would you let everybody into the country. Haven't vetted them. We haven't ran them through even the, I'm sure, disease tests, all the shots and immunizations that we're supposed to do. There's no way those people are getting those types of treatment. And then by then, shut up. They bring them into the country, give them all the benefits as Americans who, again, we haven't invested, we haven't found out who they are, and let them have a piece of this, what we call the American dream, the American pie. It's not right for all other migrants that came into this country legally, who put their time in, who took the courses, who did their United States test, passed successfully, to live in this country. And Sheriff, I just feel like, and listen, I am for the entering America. I am for that. Illegally, not so much. Not so much, Sheriff. But you know more about it. But I wanted to segue into Title 42, which I want you to talk about. But most people don't understand the reason why Title 42 was enacted. It's been in our on our books for policy wise, because everybody thinks this is, well, some people think this is a bill. It's not a bill, it's a policy. But it's been on the books, and President Trump enacted on March 20th, I believe, 20, to hopefully stop spread by not allowing people who we had invested, who we hadn't ran through the system, to enter our country, knowing that we're in a pandemic. But no, we call it a plandemic. Of course, Vice President Pence enacted that. He went against the CDC, Robert Redfield, who was saying, the numbers don't really show that it's a spread, which we knew it was. Of course, we saw Fauci all over the place, right? I forgot the Dr. Birch and all those people, all right? We're saying that. But so anyways, they opened Title 42 up in an event to do two things: stop the spread, also keep illegal immigrants from entering our country during a time where we were very vulnerable health-wise, right, Sheriff? And Biden got rid of all that. And so I'm going to let you speak on it. I know you have some great information to tell us about. But all we keep hearing is Title 42, decrease, dismantle, which now is no longer a Title 42. What's your thoughts? What's your concern? And what do you have?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm going to be straight up honest with you. My beliefs, I'm a Christian, I'm conservative, but at times I don't want to call myself a Democrat or Republican, but I am a conservative. I'll tell you that. I'm a God-fearing Christian. But with that being said, at the national level, it doesn't matter if you call yourself a Republican or Democrat. Nobody wants to fix what's going on the border. Everybody's had the opportunity going back years and years, and no one's done anything to fix it. It's a solvable problem. It can be solved overnight. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you, if the federal government's willing to lie about what's going on along our borders, then what else are they going to lie to us about? Mm-hmm. And what we've seen along our border the last 2 years has been, it's been busier than any other time in history. We've seen more illegal aliens attempting to cross, apprehended, got away, and those we don't even know who they were. But to get back to your Title 42 question, first and foremost, Title 42 was enacted to protect our communities and our Border Patrol agents from COVID. It was a good policy that was put forth and enacted, again, to protect people from the COVID. However, it was time for it to go, because since we've had Title 42, we haven't had our Title 8 authority. We've been using Title 42 authority, which is if you're from Mexico or any contiguous country, which would be Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and a few other countries. Venezuela was actually put on that list. You were able to be sent right back to Mexico. Your records, we take your fingerprints, we take your biometrics. And if you had a criminal history here in the United States, yes, we would prosecute you. But if you were just crossing our border, you had no criminal history, and under Title 8, that's what we used to do. That serves as a deterrent. So again, Title 42, catch, apprehend, send back. So with that said, our recidivism rates, the rate of reapprehension, increased. We were below 10%. We were around 5, 6, 7%, under Trump with Title 8. Title 42 was brought forth. Our recidivism rate, our rate of reapprehension went up into the 25, 26, 27%. I forget exactly which one, but you could Google that. So Title 42 was meant to protect people. COVID's gone. It's time to get rid of it, which we finally did. It was being used as an immigration tool, and we need to get back to our Title 8 and use that to prosecute people illegally entering our country in between the ports of entry. With that said, we can have, what we need is short-term plans, and we need our long-term. So short-term, we need to, again, Title 8, and then we need to bring back the Migrant Protection Protocol, because what we have at our borders, and with all the increase of people waiting in Mexico to cross our border, it was because they want to claim some sort of political relief, political asylum. And the vast majority of those aren't going to be founded cases. They're going to be unfounded. They don't have, a fear of return to their country, or credible fear. They'll make it up, but they don't have the ability to come into our country. So they're using that avenue to enter our country illegally under false pretenses. So what President Trump did, he had what was called the Migrant Protection Protocol, the MPP, or also you may know it as Remain in Mexico. If you were going to come to our country and claim asylum, you were going to have to wait in Mexico until your case was heard by an immigration judge, or an asylum, actually, someone that was listening to your case. So that served as a deterrent in itself. So that's what we need to bring back short term. Long term, we need to have border security and immigration reform. Those are two separate topics. Border security has to be complete first. We have to secure our southwest border with Mexico. You're never going to be able to secure it 100%. You're never going to be able to build a wall across the entire U.S.-Mexico border. In parts of New Mexico, Arizona, and California, out there, yes, we need a wall because it serves as a barrier and a deterrent to keep people back. They still can go over it, under it, or through it. But when you get here to Texas, we have the Rio Grande River that serves as a God-made barrier, as I like to put. It's the entire length of Mexico, and Texas is 2/3 of the U.S.-Mexico border. I think about 1,200 miles. I forget right off the top of my head, about 1,200 miles here in Texas. But the area, the Rio Grande River, where I live and south of us, you have anywhere from 500, 600, 700-foot cliffs to 1,800-foot cliffs. So that serves as a natural barrier. However, with that being said, people can still traverse and go through nooks and crannies to cross our border illegally. I want to get back to kind of to shape up what's gone on along our border, because I said, again, Republicans, Democrats have all had that opportunity. I've served under 5 different presidents, and again, I'm going to be nothing but truthful with you. So President Clinton, border security was huge back then, or illegal immigration was huge, and he did some good things. Of course, President Bush really did some good things. That's when we saw the Border Patrol really grow. We saw some new fencing starting to come in, different fencing, whether it was pedestrian fencing, vehicle barriers, things of that nature. And then we went to President Obama, and he was labeled the Porter in Chief, so he still put forth border security initiatives. And then we went to President Trump, and we saw things that we'd never seen on the U.S.-Mexico border. And what I mean by that is, we started seeing an uptick in the caravans. You remember the caravans? That's when we first started seeing the caravans. Yeah. And to counter that, that's when he threatened Mexico. He said, if you don't start patrolling the border, both the U.S.-Mexico border as well as the Mexico-Guatemala border, then we're going to increase tariffs on the goods you want to bring in the United States. And that got their attention because, the amount of trade and legitimate travel that goes on between our two countries is tremendous. I mean, we keep Mexico alive. So they listened, and they sent personnel on the U.S.-Mexico border to patrol. Never seen that before. And they also sent personnel on the Guatemala-Mexico border, and we'd never seen that before. That brought us down to the lowest levels of illegal aliens crossing our border that we had seen in about 45 years. But let me articulate a little bit more. And again, so you have U.S. Border Patrol agents. Those are agents that wear the green uniform. We're in between the ports of entry. Then we have at the ports of entry, that's where we have the legitimate trade and travel from Mexico, or international airports. If you've ever flown internationally and come back in the United States, you'll see somebody in a blue uniform. And that's a Customs and Border Protection officer. They have the same authorities we do. We're actually brother sister agencies with Customs and Border Protection. We are the law enforcement presence at the border. But you've seen this past 2 years, and let me articulate that a little bit. And I stated earlier, we've never seen the levels of activity on our southwest border like we've seen the last 2 years. And the only thing that's changed is the administration. And whether it's in between our port of entries, the amount of people we've seen apprehended, over 2 million people, to the large fentanyl seizures and other dangerous drugs that are coming through our ports of entry. And they don't just come in the ports of entry, the vast amounts do. We still have, narcotic seizures in between the ports of entry, but month after month, we'll continue to see, record-breaking loads. And the reason we're seeing record-breaking is successful. They're successful getting their drugs through our border. And we've seen just, the amount of fentanyl poisoning in our country, increase year after year. So border security is paramount. We have to secure our border, and then we can move to immigration reform. I mentioned to you, I wanted to articulate about the border, and going back to when President Clinton was president. El Paso was ground zero at one point. And that's where we had Operation Hold the Line. That's where we first started, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, started putting infrastructure. We had a chief patrol agent there named Celeste Reyes, and they started building fencing systems there. They started putting cameras there. They started putting lighting along the border. It's dark. That's when the vast majority of legal alien activity happens across the border. So they implemented lights along the border. They increased the amount of Border Patrol agents in El Paso. And that secured that piece of border. Did you still have illegal aliens crossing? Yes, you always will. But they didn't have the mass numbers. So what happened is we had a shift to San Diego, California. We had Operation Gatekeeper in California, San Diego. And again, we put forth the infrastructure, which, again, fencing systems, roadways, camera systems. We put in the technology, ground sensors, night and daytime cameras. And then we implemented more manpower, because no matter how much technology you put on the border, you're still going to need somebody with a badge that can go out there and make that apprehension, that arrest, that seizure of narcotics. So after we've secured El Paso and San Diego, we saw that shift to Nogales in the mid-90s. And that's when I came in the Border Patrol, as I mentioned, 1996. And we had the ABCI initiative, Arizona Border Control Initiative. And we did the same thing, more fencing, more roadways, more technology, and more manpower. In Nogales, for instance, when I got there, we put it over 60 agents, pushing 100 agents. And then by the time I left in 4 years, we had grown to a station of 500 Border Patrol agents. And at that time, we were catching about 1,000 illegal aliens a day, 30,000 a month. But when we implemented that border system there, it helped secure it. It displaced that activity down to the Rio Grande Valley. So we went from El Paso to San Diego to Tucson. Then it shifted down to the Rio Grande Valley. We did the same thing. Then when it forced it out to El Centro, Yuma, we implemented that same border system there. And then Del Rio and Laredo, that last portion of border where we haven't added infrastructure by fencing, technology, roadways, manpower, is right here where I live, Big Bend Border Patrol sector. It's from El Paso, this side of El Paso, which is Hudspeth County, to my county, Terrell County. That's 517 miles of border that make up the Big Bend sector. That's the largest amount of border that any sector has. It's actually a quarter of the U.S.-Mexico border. And as I mentioned earlier, my county, 54 miles of border, but we have a Border Patrol station here that's responsible for 91 miles of border, all of Terrell County and the southeast portion of Brewster County. But for that 91 miles of border, you have approximately 50 agents that are charged with patrolling that border. And I'll tell you what, they do a heck of a job. Their sign cutting abilities, their detection capabilities, their God-given skills, because we don't have a lot of technology here. They rely on looking at the ground, looking for footprints in the dirt. We have what's called drag roads, where we have a swath of land where we drag tires to loosen up the dirt. That way you can see when people cross it. So they're looking for footprints. They're looking for, when they get off that drag road, they're looking for kicked over rocks, because you can tell when you kick a rock over and there's moisture under it if someone's been there. They're looking for broken branches. They're looking for laid down grass. All of this stuff is called sign cutting. So that's what agents are doing. They're looking for a clue that someone was there, and then that's called a detection, and then they start a tracking operation, and they'll what we call leapfrog. An agent will track it so far, another agent will cut for the sign further up. We may have air support come in and assist us. We may have a drone, a Predator B, which used to be in the military, that'll come over and have technology to help us out. But it takes all of those components to successfully apprehend a group. Then you put forth, the last 2 years what Governor Abbott's done along the border. He got fed up with the federal government, because the federal government has authority for illegal immigration. States don't have that authority. That's the charge of the federal government. And due to the fact that the president's not putting forth the right capabilities at the border, Border Patrol agents are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but there's just so many people, it's clogged up the system. So for instance, and I'll get back to my Governor Abbott thought, but for instance, Border Patrol, we're just like a police station. We apprehend people, we process them, and then we send them back, or we send them down the line. So if it's somebody who can go back to Mexico, we send them to Mexico. But if it's someone who's either going to be prosecuted or from another country under Title 8, we can't just send somebody from Guatemala to Mexico. We have to repatriate them to their country of origin. And you're right when you said earlier, it's not just people we're catching from Mexico. People have always said, you guys are racist. You only are looking to target Mexicans. Well, that's not true. We catch people from all over the world. Central America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, you name it, we catch people from all over the world. So no, we're not just looking for Mexicans. We're looking for anybody or anything that crosses that border illegally. So moving forth with that, the amount of assistance that the governor has given us has just been tremendous. He's deployed Texas Department of Public Safety personnel to include Rangers, CID agents, which are their criminal investigative divisions, to Texas Department of Public Safety highway patrol officers, which are the black and white highway patrol units you see and that Texas is proud of. He's put forth Texas Parks and Wildlife game wardens, who give us a tremendous amount of assistance. And then he's also deployed Texas military forces, the Texas National Guard along the border. He did that to fill the gap that the federal government has left. And again, Border Patrol agents are doing a heck of a job, but once they catch them, and I was talking about, that process being clogged, we catch them. If they're an unaccompanied juvenile, they go to Health and Human Services. If they're from another country, they go to ICE ERO, which is removal operations. Those processes have become so clogged because there's so many people that Border Patrol has to hold on to them long term. That's why you see Border Patrol building these tent camps to hold people. We're not supposed to be, but we're forced to do so because we have no other alternative. And when people talk about the way we treat people, I can tell you there's no other place in the world where people are treated like they are here at the U.S.-Mexico border. Reason that is because we're still the greatest country in the world. Yeah. So great that when you cross our borders illegally, you have the same rights that you or I do. Any illegal alien who crosses our border have the same right that you or I do. Due process. They can see an immigration judge. Please. Likely they're going to be sent back to their country of origin, but they have that ability. When they talk, historically about kids in cages isn't true. When they talk about, the bad conditions, by law, we have to check on people, every 15 to 30 minutes. We have to feed people regularly. We have logs we fill out. So people are well kept along our southwest border. I can promise you that. But I tell you, we're seeing more activity than we've ever seen. And we're counting on seeing that for the next 2 years until we get another. It's going to take a change in administration to fix this. Why is the president doing it? Well, like you said, it's not the president making these decisions. He may give the nod, but it's his staff, it's his administration, it's the people that put him in office at that level that are wanting to change this to social.
I agree. I totally agree. You said something very important, and people have got to hear this. And you're hearing it from a former Border Patrol and still works down the border. You heard him say it is not true what you're hearing about how we treat these immigrants, illegal aliens. They're not against the UTVs, the four-wheel vehicles. They're not, despite what we saw in the media, chasing them around on horses. Of course, said that the border was being very racist to the Haitian immigrants that was coming in. They took live video of them chasing, allegedly trying to round them up like livestock, which we know that was not true. But a lot of people bought that false narrative on the left side, as we like to say. Of course, that went away after weeks because people started to wake up, I guess, or just wasn't for being a fulfilled news story any longer that the border patrols were acting like cowboys in the Wild Wild West. And it did play out for a while, but it got old. You know, we got tired of hearing it. At some point, you just don't want to be fed, like we say, the BS. Going back to what you said, y'all are not treating these people the way, and you know, you look at it, technically they are criminals. They are trying to illegally, but yet you still feed them. God forbid the medical care you have to give them because a lot of them are getting sick. And I understand, Sheriff, a lot of, and I found this out on Newsmax for some actual live migrants who were reporting from all across the country on the southern border that they sexual assaults have gone up. Assaults in general has gone up because these here having sex, bid the child molestation that is going on. But despite all that, I look at the cost of this operation, just alone our federal government that we have to use law enforcement wise, the manpower there, and I'm sure you're just as short as any other law enforcement agency in America, the federal forces, and then we look at the food, the medical, and then we look at the transportation to get these people back to their homelands. This is a lot of revenue, a lot of time, a lot of effort is going into the southern border, and it's like a revolving door. You said something that was so profound. You mentioned, I had never heard of that before. What do you call it? Grass cutting? What was that term when you go ahead and look for these details and clues? Cutting. You mentioned, I'm sitting there listening to you talk. I'm like, that is a revolving door. It's like what we got going on in New York, you know, the county district attorney, criminals out on bond. And what are they doing? They're going out and committing another crime. It's just the same for y'all. And as a local law enforcement officer, I've run into illegal aliens who actually was deported and made their way back into the country to commit more crime. So I know a little bit about it, don't know as much as you. I can only imagine. It is a revolving door, Sheriff. How do you all combat that? At some point, do you say, hands down, I know in your heart you can't because you're defending our country, but what's the attitude of these border patrols out there knowing that they're fighting?
Remind me to touch on the attitude part, but you made some good points, and I mentioned to you when we first started talking, you know, and you experienced the same being in law enforcement. People often say, thank you for what you do. You're so brave. Your job's so hard. Well, I'm attracted to law enforcement from a very young age because I knew what the threats were. I knew what the dangers were. I've been shot at. I've been in fights. I've been in pursuits. You know, you name it. I've experienced it in the United States Border Patrol as well as here at the sheriff's office. But I joined law enforcement because that's what I was attracted to. What's hard about my job, being a border patrol agent and now being the sheriff, because we have no crime in Terrell County. Our main crime is border security. But what's hard about being a border patrol agent is when you see on a daily basis, if you've got a heart and you care about people and you see young kids, you see women at all ages, you see elderly, poorest of the poor trying to cross our borders, that's tough. It wears on you. Yes, you're right. They're breaking the laws, and we're going to enforce the laws of the United States of America. And that's what we need to do. Right now, we're not enforcing them, meaning not that I'm not, but our federal government, the current presidential administration, is not allowing us to enforce the laws. If we just enforce the laws on the book, it would be something totally different. And I got from a good friend of mine who ran for Congress, Irene Armendariz Jackson. She mentioned, and I mentioned in one of my interviews, it's not that our immigration system broken, it's that DC is broken, and it's so true. But getting back to, they're people too. Yes, you do have the criminal element, the people you've experienced that have been deported and they've re-entered and they've They've been arrested for, I mean, we catch murderers, people that have drank and drive, people that have sexual assaulted other people. I mean, any crime that we have in America, they've committed, they've been deported, and now they're coming back. But that's not all the people. There are also a lot of good people, but again, they're still breaking the law. So with that said, you know, we talked about the level of activity along the border, and what you're seeing in Del Rio last year with the Haitians under the crossing at Del Rio, you know, and I forget how many thousands were there. What you've seen happen in El Paso here these recent months, the Sanderson Border Patrol Station, we're in between Del Rio, Texas, and El Paso, Texas, and we're typically the busiest station in that swath of border. That's about just over 5, maybe close to 600 miles. We're the busiest station, and historically, we've had about 1,000 apprehensions a year, and that's a drop in the bucket compared to other places. And the reason is due to the terrain I mentioned to you. It's the roughest, toughest terrain. There's no infrastructure south of us to facilitate a large, nor is there not much infrastructure north of us to facilitate that flow out. But like the rest of the border, in 2021, that first year President Biden took over, our apprehensions went from 1,000 to 5,500, and then in 2022 it jumped to 7,400. We had like a 450% increase in illegal alien activity. That was just apprehensions. Also, our gotaways went from about 1,500 a year. It jumped up to last year just over 8,000. So we had, what I can tell you, we had about 7,400 apprehensions, somewhere over 7,000 apprehensions, 8,000 gotaway equals 50,000. And my number only, there's no count, but probably another 5,000 that made it through undetected, unaccounted for, and we have no idea who they are. So you look at in our area, about 20,000 people that cross this section of border. Again, 50 agents to combat that. 2 sheriff's personnel, myself and my chief deputy, Diego, and then that 1 Texas highway patrol trooper, and then 2 Parks and Wildlife game wardens that are here full time. And then, like I mentioned, we have the governor rotating personnel out. And to that point, I want to mention that. So this past year, this fiscal year in October, we've assisted Border Patrol either with apprehensions or assisting them apprehend almost 700 illegal aliens. They've apprehended almost 4,000 this year. Of those 4,000, we've helped with 700. We've taken close to almost 200 vehicles off the road. And when I speak to us on that specific number, the 200, that's between us and Highway Patrol. And I want to take that one step back further. So in October, beginning of this fiscal year, we saw a significant increase in activity, and to the point where Border Patrol couldn't handle it, we couldn't handle it, and the state resources we had here couldn't handle it. So I took the opportunity to write a letter to the governor. I thanked him for what he had done here already. I congratulated him on his recent win to be our governor again, and then I asked him for additional resources. The very next day, I got a call from one of his staffers, and then she coordinated for a call between me and him the following day. And within 2 days, he gave me exactly what I asked for, which was an additional 10 highway patrol troopers to help patrol the highways here in Terrell County. And after that, November to December, we took over 100 cars off the highway that were here to smuggle illegal aliens. So I tell people I was having the time of my life. It reminded me of being a brand new Border Patrol agent in Nogales, Arizona. Fortunately and unfortunately, we've only had 1 bad accident, because when you encounter that many vehicles, you have a lot of pursuits. People who aren't willing to stop, they're going to run. So that the pursuit is on. We had 1 accident that actually killed 4 people. It killed 2 undocumented aliens, 2 illegal aliens, and then it killed 2 people that were from Mexico that were allowed to come in the United States and work in the oil field. We're in an area of Texas, the Permian Basin, where there's a lot of gas and oil. So unfortunately, that wreck killed 4 people. But at that point is when I said, I'm not going to let anything run through my town in a pursuit. So we started coordinating those pursuits a lot better. My chief deputy, he gets on the radio and he'll talk people through, where are you at? Where are you heading? Well, let's wait to light it up until we get to the other side of town. I've shot out 3 tires with the shotgun as I'm driving, because I won't let anything come through my town. And I don't say that in a manner to brag or that cowboy, but I'm not going to risk someone in my community getting hit by a car that's failing to yield, that's leading us on a pursuit. So I've shot out 3 tires. We've spiked multiple vehicles. We use spike mats that we lay across the highway. I've spiked a lot more vehicles being the sheriff than I ever did at the Border Patrol. I'm not sure if I told you earlier, but I tell you, I've caught more illegal aliens this past year than I caught the last 11 years. I've worked 100 times harder, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I've done. It's required so much more than what required at the Border Patrol. All for about a quarter of the pay, but I would do it for free. I tell you that. It's been to protect our borders, protect my community, and to assist those agents I used to work with. It's been a great opportunity.
I love it. And I'll say, Sheriff, the reason why you're able to do all these things at a bigger scale without any, as we call, hands tying you down, because you are the sheriff. You have nobody that you answer to other than the governor. So you can blow out tires, you can shoot them out, and you can deputize.
Hey, so actually, I don't even report to the governor.
Wow.
You know, the governor has to get permission to send people into our county, and we welcome them here. And I say that respectfully. And you're right. So the red tape, while at Border Patrol, of course, when we catch somebody in it, let's just use an illegal alien smuggling load. You get a driver, the person that's the principal of the smuggling load. We have to go through the assistant U.S. attorney to get approval for prosecution. And it used to be where they would take a sworn statement. Well, then they started wanting them to have them, tape recorded. Then they wanted to have them video recorded. The administration has made it harder and harder to prosecute the smugglers. Not only that, the amount of required paperwork it takes to process a smuggling case, to seize a vehicle. Here at the state level in the county, I can knock out an illegal alien smuggling load in about an hour. And I've got a district attorney over in Delaware, Texas, Suzanne West, that just does a phenomenal job. Hasn't kicked back a single case yet. So at the state level, we have it right. At the federal level, we need some work done. But of course, and it's not that the assistant U.S. attorneys are bad. It's that they have to, like the rest of the government, they have to fall in line with the current administration.
I got you. Let me tell you something. Donald J. Trump, guess what? If you're looking for your next director to lead the United States Border Patrol, Sheriff Thaddeus, Cleveland might be your man. You love being the sheriff, and I know you're a great people that you serve in your community of Terrell County. I want you to go anywhere, but and the acting gentleman, I'm sure you would know who that is, Border Patrol director. I think he did a beautiful job there, but tell you, like you said, it is a loops and all these holes and checks and balances that you have to go through just to make one apprehension case. And I think that was designed on purpose. I think that was designed on purpose because as law enforcement officers, you know better than I know, the more paperwork you have to do on one case keeps us from pursuing other cases because we're so much tied down on this one. So that becomes an issue. And I wish the people that make the rules and laws, most of them made up of attorneys, will actually see. We love paperwork. We need documentation. We're all about that. But the amount of paperwork they have what's doing it keeps us tied up in the office from going out to guys. So probably 5 out of your 10 or probably more getting away because we are sitting here trying to finish out one caseload. But I'm glad you got a strong district attorney. That makes a huge difference. Sheriff, that is a beautiful thing. What I want to do, I want to just take a quick moment to break off for a moment. I want to come back in and give our listeners some more of this, and I love it. I know they're loving it, and I know you are, Sheriff. You are what we call a walking book of information as it pertains to law enforcement and the southern border. So I want to say to the listeners, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Hang tight. We're coming back.